Hi, Eisno here with the Duck, and welcome to Horrific History, the channel that puts the horror into all things historic. Those of you who are subscribed, welcome back. If you're new, please hit the subscribe button if you like this video. So sit back, relax and enjoy today's story. The Barghest Beast. It is highly recommended not to wander through the narrow, cramped side streets of Whitby alone at night. If you do, you would be unaware of what demonic beast may be stalking the shadows alongside you. You see, the town of Whitby and the surrounding Yorkshire moors are rumoured to be haunted by a ghastly creature that takes a huge, imposing wolf-like form. With bright, piercing blood red or ghoulishly green eyes, enormous razor-sharp fangs dripping with the blood of its last unfortunate victim, and massive talon-like claws. If the abhorrent beast's appearance wasn't already frightening enough, it possesses an unparalleled, deafening howl. It can stalk its prey without a single sound, runs faster than any person could ever dream of running. Even locked doors and hopeless obstacles are unable to halt the beast from its eventual horrific intention. Hearing the beast's ear-splitting howl brings an almighty sense of fear and woe over a person. As it's told, this indicates that they are the next to die most horribly at its hideously monstrous clutches. So if you are ever unfortunate enough to hear the beast's demented cry, it is well advised to immediately seek solace and hide where you possibly can. Maybe you'll be the lucky one and it preys on a farmer's livestock or a wild animal instead of you. What is this grotesque revenant called? Well, it's the legendary Barghest. The Barghest beast is considered by those who believe in folklore to be a huge black dog. These dogs historically are a particular type of ghost or spectre that is most often associated with death, demonic forces, or even hell itself. This association with death may be derived from the scavenging habits of wild dogs. It's also reported that the Barghest and similar ghostly black wolf-like dogs can often be seen during violent electrical storms, and have been said to be also sighted at isolated crossroads, places of violent executions and remote ancient bridleways. While the origin of the ghostly black dogs is hard to pin down, it certainly has ties to both the Celtic and Germanic parts of ancient British folklore. Their association with death may be from the scavenging habits of dogs. Although Whitby is a particularly infamous location for sightings of the Barghest, it certainly isn't the only place such a monstrosity has been documented. Not far from Appletreewick in the Yorkshire Dales is Troller's Gill, a limestone gorge, which locals have proclaimed is the actual home of the Barghest. Have you seen the Barghest or an equally terrifying demonic black dog-like creature? If so, let me and the Duck know about it in the comments section. The Western Lighthouse Keeper. If you happen to be walking along the Whitby West Pier at night, you may catch sight of the brave lighthouse keeper who sadly gave his own life attempting to protect the sailors of Whitby. Many years ago, one of the most horrendous storms in recent memory bore down on the coast just off Whitby Harbour. A lone lighthouse keeper glanced up at his lighthouse and to his horror, the light was no longer working. He instantly realised that any ships out at sea would find it nearly impossible to gauge how dangerously close they were to the cliffs and the harbour wall. To make things even more treacherous, the huge crashing waves were making it practically inconceivable for any approaching ship to stay clear from guaranteed disaster. The lighthouse keeper knew what he needed to do, and immediately at that. He set off without a thought to his own life, only thinking of the lives of desperate sailors on the approaching ships in the storm. As he struggled to climb the lighthouse tower, getting battered and blown around by the gale-force wind and torrential ice-cold rain, he miraculously made it to the top and relit the light. However, as he climbed up, rainwater had dripped off his utterly drenched clothes, making the steps incredibly treacherous to anyone attempting to descend them. As he made his way back down the stairs, grinning from ear to ear at his incredible achievement, he tragically slipped and instantly broke his neck. By the time he hit the floor by the entrance to the lighthouse, he was sadly dead. He can now be seen lingering in that very spot near the entrance where he drew his last breath. Many visitors have reported seeing him laid at the bottom of the stairs in total distress, calling out for help that will never arrive. Although it's more commonplace to spot the ghostly figure of the lighthouse keeper rushing up the pier towards the lighthouse, unknowingly heading for his own premature yet valiant demise. The landlady of the White Horse and Griffin Inn. The White Horse and Griffin Inn, originally built in about 1691, with its long history, it's unsurprising to learn it's been the stage for a variety of ghostly sightings, which have apparently been witnessed by a multitude of guests and staff alike. One of these lost souls is that of a previous landlady by the name of Mrs. Bowler. However, the exact date of her untimely death is said to be undocumented, although it was sometime in the late 19th century. When she was of this earth, Mrs. Bowler was a lady that was best to be shunned and generally avoided at all cost. When she randomly decided to take a personal disliking to you, you most undoubtedly knew about it. She would judge on patrons to the inn almost immediately. With a slight glance, she would have you either pinned as a friend or a foe. More often than not, she would happily choose the latter. One cold, dark winter night, after clearing the inn of drunken customers, Mrs. Bowler was going about her nightly chore of taking the empties out back. She carefully made her way down the steps at the back of the inn, tumbled on a slippery step, took a terrible fall and cracked her head clean open on the steps behind. No one heard her blood-curdling screams of intense pain echoing down the dimly lit back street. She eventually slowly bled to death over several hours after falling unconscious alone amongst the cobblestones. Since her death, the inn's clientele have reported feeling either exceptionally welcome when entering the inn or very utterly unwelcome. Customers say they sense an uneasy feeling that makes them want to about turn and immediately leave. Even when the White Horse and Griffin briefly became a sort of museum housing various Victorian curiosities, people would say they would feel her eerie presence. Amid the 1980s, there was even an offer of a £50 reward to any one person who stayed in one of the inn's rooms and remained there until morning. The White Horse and Griffin Inn now, and to be fair, always was a delightful pub, minus the years Mrs. Bowler's ran the place. Now it has an utterly captivating landlady who is welcome to all and sundry. But back in the late 19th century, it was maybe a place to give a short shrift. So if you happen to pop into the inn for a pint or several and feel somewhat discomposed or a tad anxious, then it's likely Mrs. Bowler has taken an unnecessary dislike to you. The Oyster Man of Whitby. Oysters may now be an expensive delicacy in fancy restaurants around the world, but they used to be especially beloved in the majority of towns around the UK and were considered more of a poor man's food. Many folks depended on this commonplace staple food as their daily meal. Gadgie Clark, or the Oyster Man of Whitby as he was more commonly known by the town's locals, was a recognisable tradesman throughout the bustling town. He was always seen to be strolling through the streets and public houses, selling his tasty oysters to hungry residents. You'd always hear him, before you saw him, bellowing, "Oysters alive, oh! Oysters alive, oh!" as he huffed and puffed, struggling to carry his heavy basket of oysters to prospective customers day after day without respite. One fateful night, a group of rowdy men, including a man by the name of John Smith, was drinking with his gang of hoodlums. No one actually knew where John lived, although stories were told of him potentially being a highwayman or perhaps a smuggler. But what was known of this awful excuse for a man was that he was seriously bad news and should always be given a wide berth. John saw the Oysterman enter the Golden Lion pub and beckoned him over to his table, where he instantly began insulting him most horribly. The Oysterman instantly realised that no sales were to be made in that establishment that night, especially at John's table, and abruptly turned to quickly leave, muttering quietly to himself. Unfortunately for him, one of the men at the table overheard what he'd said and couldn't bear to be insulted. He grabbed the oyster basket and tossed it into the roaring open fire. Then he proceeded to grab the Oysterman and threatened to toss him into the flames to burn with his now charred wares. The Oysterman was understandably frightened. Though he was a relatively short man, he took the offensive stance, which he believed was his only option, pulled out the razor-sharp knife he carried upon him, which he used for opening oysters, and quickly stabbed his aggressor. Unfortunately, to the entire pub's surprise, the Oysterman dispatched an instantly fatal blow, accidentally piercing the man's heart as he lashed out in self-defence. Although at his trial he was unanimously found not guilty of murder and released without charge, the Oysterman could never forgive himself for taking another man's life. He did continue to sell his oysters in Whitby, although he always avoided the Golden Lion pub. Sadly, this tale has a pitiful conclusion, and the Oysterman's overwhelming guilt constantly ate at his conscience, and within a year, unfortunately, he died of remorse. To this very day, the Oysterman can still be witnessed meandering through the hard cobbled streets attempting to sell his delicious wares to customers who can't even see him. On peaceful evenings, make sure you listen out for his usual holler as you make your way back home. Just don't throw any insults his way. You'll be paying to hear that's it for today. So if you like this video, myself and the Duck implore you to like and subscribe. If you have any stories you'd like us to cover, do let us know in the comments, and if you must and feel so inclined, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. As always, stay weird and bye for now. Quack, quack, quack.